So welcome to the Bill Forum. We meet on the 8th of every month to really discuss and exchange some notes on what is the latest, what is most critical, what are the key themes on building around building for women. And speaking on behalf of IMA Ventures, our central thesis has been to really support and catalyze entrepreneurial action and tech-led innovation in hard-to-build spaces and markets where there are high barriers of entry, high barriers of service, and inclusive fintech definitely is one of those sectors and markets, and more sort of precisely digital financial services for women being a really critical sector that is overlooked, that is not really understood, and hence hence we decided why not speak to folks in the industry who have been uh, interfacing with this clientele, have a better understanding, are probably struggling with similar challenges and similar barriers, and really have that kind of a tete-a-tete where we can all come and exchange ideas. And so that really is how we are coming together today. And Chaitra, I'm not sure if maybe Supriya or anyone else has gone over this, but so Chaitra, you're the founder of Salt, and in one of our earlier conversations, I remembered that very early in your career, you were able to identify that there are very different markers when it comes to serving women and getting engagement with women, specifically around referrals, around getting repeat value, around getting uh, uh, around building trust with women. And eventually, today you have sort of created an investment platform that is specifically dedicated to women, which at the market standard is really a breakthrough. So really excited to hear what you would have to say and learn from your journey. So please, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Trisha. So, when I was thinking about what should I talk about today, one of the things that helped was that this is going to be a small group. So we can hopefully have a more interactive and a more meaningful conversation, instead of a one-sided lecture of sorts. I want to present three sort of themes which have been instrumental in helping me as a product builder when it comes to capturing markets, we should say, right? So my first startup was Simple, and Simple was a buy now, pay later product. My second startup is Salt, and Salt is a personal finance management platform built intentionally for women. It's inclusive of men. And I think that sentence, being inclusive of men, is my first theme. So as a product builder, my philosophy has always been baking marketing into the product itself, meaning product-led marketing. I think the most sustainable, the most successful, the most, I would say the starkest indicator of success is when your product does not need paid marketing, at least in its early days. There is a time where there's a time and scale beyond which marketing is essential, like ATL and BTL and those typical forms. But I think the most important thing from a 0 to 1 point of view is our customers who are using your product, talking about it to others with love, with enthusiasm, and with trust, right? So those, I think, are the most important, or that is the most important aspect of success, or that's the most fundamental aspect of success. Unless, you are a cred or somebody else was raised $100 million to start with, in which case you can be easy on the product and you can go 99 million on marketing, right? So there are caveats for that in India, but the environment today is not entertaining of those types of businesses anymore. So as a product builder, in fact, I'm actually enthused by the turn in the situation, because the great products that I've seen come into this world, whether it's Google or Amazon or Yahoo, like the global dominant products, have been products which have delivered value inherently to customers, right? So one of the most important parts that a lot of product builders miss is intentional design, right? You talk about human-centric design, and human-centric design usually translates to man-centric design, because one of the things that men have as a more common attribute than women is in public fora, when sent a survey, when asked to opine on something, men are 5 times more vocal than women. Women are definitely vocal in private circles, and I'll come to that, and that's a very important parameter. But in, like, you send a survey to 10 people, 5 and 5, 5 men and 5 women, most likely 4 of those 5 men will take it, but maybe if you're lucky, 1 woman will take it. Right? That's usually the way it works. So even to get women's voices, to know what women have to say, as product builders, we have to work 5 times harder. That's been my experience. Now, the question as a product builder and as a business builder, I've always asked myself, in my early days, I never asked it. But once I built a business and I saw the business value that women as a cohort bring to any business, then I started seeing the value in putting that additional 5x effort upfront, right? So at Salt, for instance, women, the average order value from women was 3 to 5x, 3 to 5 times, not 30 to 50%, but 3 to 5 times higher than the average industry, than the industry average of our nearest competitor. For example, on digital gold, Jar, which was also a competitor selling digital gold, had an average order value of about 100 rupees. And their Salt's average order value varied between 800 to 1,000 rupees. So it's 8 to 10x higher, depending on the season. On mutual funds, average SIP as published on the internet is about 2,000 to 2,400 rupees in India. Our average SIP used to vary between 12 to 14,000 rupees per month, right? So you can see the difference. And similarly, even at Simple, there were 2 things from a business perspective that women, one, they used to be more likely to repay on time and more likely to repay. So the defaults, the risk was much lower. Second is, one of the primary struggles for me at Simple had been that when people would discover Simple on, let's say, Zomato, they would continue to use it on Zomato, but they would not use it on a Big Basket or on a Make My Trip or somewhere else. Now, of course, they use it everywhere. But I'm talking about year number 1 and 2, when it was not top of mind, right? They used to use it on the platform on which they discovered. And that for us used to be a problem, because the business model was designed to make more money when a good user utilizes the entire credit line. So if you have a 10,000 rupee credit line, and you utilize most of your 10,000 rupees, then the platform makes money. Because otherwise, the platform loses money from the opportunists who just use it. Opportunists are always maxing out the credit limits, right? So we wanted the good users to max out on the credit limits. And that would not happen in a straightforward way. That was, in fact, for the first, even in year number 4, that was our biggest struggle. But the female customers, they used to more organically, they were 3 times more likely to use Simple on other platforms wherever they were shopping than their male counterparts. Right? So therefore, it makes business sense to put in that extra effort to design with women in mind. And there I come back to the original line. So my flavor of human-centric design, irrespective of what product I build, I don't have to be selling financial services to women, but any product that I build, my philosophy has now evolved to be inclusive of men philosophy. What does that mean? Is send out, like, let's say you're surveying 100 people, make sure that 70% of the respondents are women. For that, you might have to put in 140% effort to get those responses, or maybe even 210% effort. But it is worth it, because those 70% responses that you get from women give you at least 3 distinct flavors of needs. Versus the 30% that I get from men, one, it comes very easily. I don't have to put any extra man up. And that is usually one-dimensional in nature. Women give me, in my experience, women give me at least 3 different dimensions of needs to the same problem statement, compared to men, which is usually 1 or 1.5 dimensions. at best. So therefore also it is worthwhile, because then the one of the words we hear a lot these days is inclusive design, right? So by doing this, you're automatically creating a more future-proof product, a product that already meets a far higher standard in terms of delivering to your customers' needs, because you have unearthed or discovered dimensions of needs that you otherwise would not have. So that's a very important thing to remember. I mean, I'll give you a very simple example to drive this point home. How many of you have heard of the pink toilet abhiyan? So UP government, somewhere in the newspaper 2 years back, I read this, okay? And I was like, oh my God, they had to pink and shrink toilets also. And that was my first reaction. But then I went on to read the article, and it said that, oh, in UP, we want to create toilets for women, and we want it to be, because when we are creating for women, the makers of these toilets suddenly seem to realize that they need to make them safe, clean, and hygienic. Now, my question was, immediately, I turned around and asked my husband, do men not want safe, clean, and hygienic toilets? Of course they do. But when you go and talk to women, they will bring out these 3 dimensions for you crystal clearly, right? So I think when you actually make that effort to talk to enough number of women, you really get to identify the key dimensions to make your product successful. In the case of a toilet, it's safe, clean, and hygienic. So hopefully that should be a good way to remember it, pink toilets. The second thing that I want to talk about, or the second concept that I want to talk about, is what designing for women or what marketing to women is not, right? This is a common mistake that businesses make, that they only think of women when women are the majority customers. Meaning, if you're selling makeup, you think of women. If you're selling fashion, especially women's fashion, then you think of women. But if you flip it on its head and just, so what designing for women is not, or what inclusive design is not, is it is not women as majority customers. What it is women as equal users across whatever product and service you're going to sell. Right? So that is one very important thing. Then the second thing is, another mistake people make is they think of women only when something is only for women, like menstrual products or reproductive health related products, etc. But that's not what women-centric design is not when it is only for women. The way I remember it is women-centric design is when design is inclusive of men. So that's just a simple mental model to remember these things. The other aspect that I wanted to share is what, in my 10 years of building products and businesses, what have I observed in terms of what makes women different, right? And this is a very, very, I guess, over the years, accumulated set of observations. One is very clearly that women are value seekers. They are time poor, right? Because they are time poor, they don't have the patience or the intention to try out 10 different things to land on that one thing that works for them. They're very intentional and considered buyers. They are not impulsive. By contrary, I think the normal word on the street, or the perception or the bias, is that women tend to be impulsive shoppers or impulsive buyers. But that's not the case. 99% or 99.99% of the times, women are very intentional buyers, very considered buyers. That's why when you go and sell something, it's your early adopters are most likely, or first movers are definitely most likely going to be men organically, because women will come slowly. Now, what do they need to convert them to being customers is, one, your product needs to deliver that value that they seek. How do they discover whether your product delivers or that value that they seek is largely through social proof or word of mouth. They need to have heard it from people around them. It need not be their own friend, By the way, one of the things is men tend to trust something only if it comes from certain people's mouths. Women don't have that kind of a special filter. They need to have heard it enough number of times. They don't place special emphasis ki, oh, if Chaitra is saying this, then it must be very, very good. Sure, they do have their friends and they trust some people's words more than others, but that social proof, they need to have heard it enough. It needs to be that buzz, or that word of mouth needs to be there. I'll give you an example here in my personal experience. In 2019, it was year number 5 of Simple, and I was conceptualizing an offline solution for Simple. And as part of that conceptualization of the product, I was prototyping it, etc. I was pretending to be an intern along with 2 other interns, and we were in supermarkets inside apartment complexes in Bangalore. There's a startup called 10 Minute who wanted us to do a pilot for them. And in Brigade, Shobha, Prestige, etc., the 10 Minute supermarkets, we were piloting there. So we did a pilot in about 10 shops, and the modus operandi was 15 days, 2 interns plus me in each of those shops, put up some collateral about Simple, talk to all the walk-in customers, onboard as many people as possible. In 2 weeks, we used to be able to onboard 25% of the shopping janta in that complex. And that was good enough for us, because after that, it kind of maintained itself, right? The customer share was good enough. That was our MO. Every 2 weeks, the interns would move out. There was one store. By the way, one more thing that we observed there, which is again a behavioral insight into women, is 10 out of 10 people that I would talk to and tell them about, hey, Simple Zakhata, would you like it? Blah, blah, blah. When I spoke to men, I got a binary response, yes or no. Very clear. And the no's usually used to be irrational no's. The examples were, one of the most common one was, mere papa ne kaha hai, beta zindagi mein credit kabhi mat lena. And therefore they won't take credit, right? No matter what you try to tell them that, no, this is a convenience product, there's no credit, there's no interest, doesn't matter. Or the second most common reason used to be, oh, UPI, I work in IT security and I don't trust the security of digital payments, therefore I will never do. These irrational no's, everybody else used to be a yes, because the convenience made sense. Women, on the other hand, 10 out of 10 consistently across the stores used to be like, they would listen to everything and at the end of it say, okay, let me come back. And the most common reason given used to be, let me talk to my husband and come back. And obviously the feminist in me was like, very disturbed by this. I was like, why do you need your husband's permission to sign up for something so simple, as the name suggests? And so I invited myself over to their homes because it really disturbed me. It shook me at a very fundamental level. I had to get to the bottom of it. So I invited myself over for chai and I started talking to these people to understand what happens in their house, how does money flow, who makes what decisions. Much to my relief, I realized feminism was not a threat. They were probably more empowered than their spouses to take whatever decision they wanted to take. It was just their way of buying time. They did not like being put on a spot to decide immediately whether they want to sign up for this or not. Now, I discovered that my diagnosis was successful, but I was nowhere close to finding a solution for this. So then, serendipitously, the solution presented itself to me. What happened in one of the stores in Dasra, my interns said it was Dasra time. So they said, we'll put up a stall and did some brand marketing type activities, games, etc., etc. And we got, after spending 6,000 rupees, they got 3 signups. It was 2,000 rupees per signup. And I was like, boss, not worth it. So failed experiment, moved on. 3 months later, I was looking at the data and I saw that there was all the stores, 10 stores, 2 weeks after the interns leave, the signups were in single digit, 2, 3, 5 per week. There was this one store, Shobha in Whitefield, where there were double-digit signups. And when I further double-clicked, most of them were women. I was like, what is going on here? Turns out this was that place where the Dasara thing had happened. And then upon further investigation, I discovered in marketing parlance, what we had done was awareness creation. And what had happened organically was, because there was awareness of the brand, people were talking about it, or there were some questions asked. There were enough number of voices. Basically, social proof was there. People who had signed up, that 25% cohort, they were like, "Ha, ye to bahut aasan hai. This is very easy. It makes my life easier, etc." So that word of mouth and social proof had been sort of engineered over there the because of the brand awareness that was created, right? And therefore, after we had all left, women being who they are, which are basically they're buyers, they don't like being sold to. So when we had gotten out of the way, they opted in for this service that they had discovered the value for. Now, where else did I see this phenomena? Which is what led me to, by the way, start Salt, right? My thesis was that if we apply these principles and to financial services or to any product, you can acquire more female customers. And because it makes business sense to acquire them, fintech is or even finance generally, is where women are grossly underserved as customers, right? So the thesis was that how do we go beyond microfinance into crack the middle class customer market? And these were the principles that Salt was built on. So where else? Then after I experienced this, I went to corroborate my findings. I looked at diapers.com in the US. I looked at Zappos. I looked at Myntra and Nykaa in India. And here are my observations. One is, one of the things Myntra did differently at that time. Flipkart, by the way, had spent $2 billion trying to crack fashion, and they had not been able to. They had to acquire Myntra for $1 billion afterwards. Why? Because Flipkart did not, being built the way they built, thinking that they are gender agnostic, were actually more male centric. They did not know how to, they hadn't built the muscle to acquire women as customers. One simple thing Myntra did was, instead of small thumbnails, women are time poor, they don't have too much time. So they made their thumbnails big. As you scroll, you could see those images very clearly of the product so that you only click into whatever you want. Second is the return policy, which is, women don't like hassle. So again, going back to make sure your product has features that hit the nail on its head, is they don't like hassle. So the return policy of Myntra was very hassle-free. You can order 3 sizes, return 2. Where else did I see this? Shoes, Zappos. I mean, back then, nobody thought you can sell shoes online, right? I was in the US when Zappos became a success story, and the primary, the anchor of their success story was their return policy. They encouraged people to buy 3 different sizes in every shoe or sandal that you buy, and you could return everything that you did not like, right? So that's one very big example. Then the third thing that I looked at was Nykaa. What is it that Nykaa did differently compared to their counterparts? Again, Amazon, Flipkart could not crack beauty, influencer marketing. And it was not the big influencers that Nykaa got. It was your social proof creators or the local voices, the neighborhood person, the people that I think are normal. It's not Masaba, it's not somebody else like Alia Bhatt and I saw this at Salt. We had in the beginning, so Masaba is an angel investor and a customer. So was this person called Eshna Kuti. Now Eshna is much more popular. She's a hula hoop trainer. But back then, 2 years back, she wasn't that big a deal on social media. And so we did this influencer marketing thing with both Masaba and Eshna. And Eshna's output or the customers that we got through the Eshna collab was, I think, 15, 20x of Masaba. So we got a lot of viewership from the Masaba campaign, but it did not convert to customers. Eshna viewership was a lot, or the views on Instagram were a lot lesser, but a lot of them converted to being customers because people trusted that voice as being closer to their voice than that of a Masaba or somebody that they thought was, not like them, right? So this influencer marketing as a method to create social proof. And subsequently also, we saw that much to our happiness, the expensive, larger social media influencers were less valuable to us than the smaller, more neighborhood, like my neighbor type person influencers. But it is much harder work as a marketing team to go and find effective small influencers. Nika was the first one who kind of cracked it before the whole influencer marketing thing became so expensive, but it's something that's very useful as a tool. What else? Diapers.com, right? What is it that diapers.com got right? Which again led to Amazon having to acquire them. It's not like you couldn't buy diapers. I was a mother at that time when Amazon and diapers.com were vying for my business. And why did I go and land on diapers.com as opposed to Amazon? And 5 years later, when I did my research, this was backed by evidence that I collected. When I was a customer, I really didn't think about all this. I just was a happy customer. But 5 years later, when I was researching this, I discovered the following, which corroborated with my experience, which is that Amazon Pay, I used to get diapers and everything was discounted. Diapers.com was giving me a 20% discount on, I think, either the first order or the first few orders. And diapers are the most expensive item in the first 1 year or 2 years of having a child, right? Until your child is potty trained and doesn't need diapers anymore. And giving a 20% discount on the diapers, because you buy that in bulk. You don't buy it for 1 week or 2 weeks. A 20% discount probably meant that people would just order. Like I remember myself ordering for 2 to 3 months worth of diapers at a time. So they figured out what is that out of all the products that mothers buy, what is the one thing on which I can give a discount? And then I don't have to deeply discount all my other products. Right? So they figured that out. And another thing, which is in the beginning, they were not hostile to gaming of the system. They were welcoming of you gaming the system. Meaning, per email address, they gave a 20% discount on the first order. I could deliver to the same shipping address, but avail that discount by using my husband's email, my dad's, my mother's. I even created one in my son's name. And they did not crack down on it. 2 years later, by the time they were big enough, they didn't need customer acquisition to be so expensive. They started cracking down on it. They started stopping by delivery address. It's not that before that they didn't know it. It was that they were intentionally allowing it because they were trying to retain customers. They didn't want you to avail that 20% and then switch to Amazon for other orders, right? So they wanted you to continue with them until you became their habit. And that's what led to diapers.com's massive success in the US. It was one of the key factors. Amazon ended up acquiring them and Zappos, right? So you see these stories across different countries where established incumbents could not crack women-led markets, and they had to acquire challengers who, sort of got this right with respect to their clientele. So I think these are sort of the three areas that I wanted to cover. And I think just quickly, a few things that have helped me. How did I arrive at this? How did I get good at this, right? I follow a design thinking philosophy that has 4 steps to it. When I'm trying to conceptualize a product for any market, or even conceptualize a marketing campaign for any product, these 4 design principles help me a lot. The first one is observe. So in Simple's case, that offline solution, what I did was from cafes to restaurants to supermarkets to like the Starbucks of the world. I went and sat down next to the POS, and I just observed what is the cashier and the customer interaction. How does it work? Like I took a stopwatch. I used to time exactly when the customer arrives at the cashier, how long it takes for them to walk away. after completing the payment for different modes, right? So I discovered that for credit cards and all cards, it was between 30 to 35 seconds. For cash, it was about 120 to 150 seconds. For UPI back then in 2019, because the internet, I think, was flaky, it used to be 1.5 to 2 minutes. Sanket, I think you need to mute yourself. Yeah, thanks. So, so therefore, the quickest one was card, 30 to 35 seconds. And what that observation led for me was the discovery that my product, if it needs to have any chance of adoption without a cashback, needs to be at least 10 times faster than the fastest, which meant the target that I set for myself was 3 seconds of processing time. How can a transaction be processed in 3 seconds? And that was what we managed to achieve through our pilot at 10 Minute and all these other stores. And the discovery of that metric, that success metric, was because I stood there and I observed in depth, right? Sometimes it was creepy even, like I used to feel that what are these people thinking about me? But you should go ahead and do it. I used to take permission from the cashiers or the store managers in most cases before doing it. I didn't want them to think that I'm waiting to, rob them and therefore observing. Second one is interview, that talking to the stakeholders, both the customers, the cashiers, at least the visible stakeholders first. That unearthed so many other aspects of what is it that matters, right? From the cashier, I learned that a cashier's power in encouraging or discouraging a mode of payment is supreme. At Big Bazaar, Paytm, despite giving the best cashbacks, could not get any market share because the cashiers were dissuading customers from using Paytm actively. And they learned about it later, and I'll tell you why it happened. But that was a very important observation. And the cashier told me that the holy grail of payment volume, like meaning which method they recommend for customers or they encourage, is the rush hour. Because the rush hour is where their life is either made or broken, right? Because that's when you have customer after customer, people get angry, emotions run high, you want to be very efficient. So rush hour is what matters the most. Then the third aspect of design is impersonation. So I couldn't do it obviously at a Starbucks or a retail store. They wouldn't let me impersonate the cashier. But at 10 Minute stores, because they were our customer, I requested them to let me be a cashier. And one of the most important design observations I made for my pilot was the role of the keyboard in a cashier's life. I would never have discovered it if I had not impersonated the cashier, right? Because I saw that I was very slow. And then when I observed, like, why am I being so slow? Because I was using the mouse. What was it that person was doing differently was they had all these keyboard shortcuts. So in my POC, I would never have asked for keyboard shortcuts. Who asked for keyboard shortcuts in a POC? Right? But I asked for it because otherwise my POC would have failed and I would have attributed to completely wrong reasons. So that was a simple example of why impersonation helps. Last one, and a very important one, is follow the money. So and this is what brings me back to that Paytm story that I was telling you about, Paytm and Big Bazaar. So when I followed the money in this Simpleca story, I discovered this hidden stakeholder, two hidden stakeholders in this entire transaction. Until then, I thought it was the customer and the cashier. And I was very patting myself on the back for discovering the cashier as a stakeholder, who otherwise I would not have thought about. But there were two more important ones. One was the accountant of the business, and second was the store manager. Why were the two of them important? For two reasons. One is, at the end of the day, the reconciliation of whatever happened is the store manager's responsibility. And the accountant holds the store manager responsible. So if the reconciliation is not perfect, then three people's lives get affected. The accountant becomes the ultra bad person who puts pressure on the store manager, and the store manager has the job of firing the cashier. Because if things don't tally, then there is not much forgiveness in that industry. It's a day-to-day tally business, right? And as a person who had built a digital payment solution, I was used to once in a month reconciliation, which used to happen with my Zomatos and other digital clients of the world. And there a discrepancy of 10, 15,000 did not even matter. We just adjusted it in the next one. Nobody cared. Nobody's business was stopped. Nobody was fired because of it. But, and therefore for me, reconciliation and merchant dashboard for reconciliation happened 6 months after I had launched the product. But in the offline solution case, it had to be part of the POC on day one or day -1, because the accountant and the store manager had to get used to it. And every day it had to tally 100%. If I had not followed the money, I would not have discovered this. And this was what Paytm had missed in the whole Big Bazaar story. And because they didn't have daily perfect reconciliation, Big Bazaar, the cashiers and the store managers completely dissuaded their customers from using Paytm because it created a nightmare for them accounting wise. So, follow this simple principle: observe, interview, impersonate, follow the money for this thing. And now there will be many things that will fall outside of this gamut. So therefore, again, 4 things that have helped me sort of overcome this. Actually, 3 things. One is leading with curiosity. No matter how many times I have built products or features, it is very important for me to reset myself to 0 and start with humility and lead with curiosity every single time. Because I just gave you an example. The things that worked for me when I was creating the online solution, ulta, in like completely 180 degrees opposite when I was doing the offline solution. If I had gone with the same previous principles, then I would have made so many mistakes and it would have failed, but for the wrong reason. Like I would not even have known. I would have thought that, okay, there is no demand for my product, but actually it would have been a design mistake, right? So lead with curiosity.
I really hate to come in because I think others would agree that we can continue to listen to you for hours, because with everything that you say, there's a different angle that's kind of emerging. But we do have so, but this is time bound, so we are at
Okay.
3:45. If everyone else is okay, and maybe if you could confirm with a show of hands, with continuing this for maybe 10 more minutes, and check if there are questions in the house. I do have a question from someone who had to leave, but they left a question with me. Is that okay? Can we continue for maybe 10 more minutes? I'm going to assume that we're good. Okay. So others can maybe chip in and come in with their questions. So let me just pose the one that I have received. Meena Vaidyanathan, who was with us, she wants to know more about the evidence behind the purchasing differential in purchasing behavior between men and women, and what is it that makes women trust more and go for higher orders and more frequent buy-ins.
So it's the reverse. It's not like women trust more. They'll only buy from you once they trust you more. Because like I said, they're time poor. They don't want to be they don't want to be doing too much trial and error. Once they like a particular brand or a particular service, they tend to go back to the same and open up their entire share of wallet to that customer or to that business or service. For example, at Salt, what that translates to, they are very reluctant to invest. But once they trust Salt, we have seen customers progress very rapidly. They used to start with a 5,000 rupee first investment in month 1. Second month, it would go to 50,000 rupees. And the third month, it has gone to 5 lakh, the same customer, right? And settled like, so very, and there was another customer. I mean, I have many stories like this. And the second thing is they open up profit pools for you. So women have 4.5 times higher network effects than men. Meaning, if you like, you can anecdotally observe, validate what I'm saying. Women tend to be more vocal about sharing products, brands, or services that have worked for them. with their counterparts. So I'll give you a numerical example of this. We had created something called the SALT Money Personality Test, and we had shared it out. Vijay Shekhar Sharma had tweeted it. From his one tweet, we got 800 odd respondents. There was another friend of mine, Priyashmita, who tweeted it. From her direct tweet, I only got 50 test takers. But if I think 3 months later, we were measuring the network effects of everybody in the, everybody who had tweeted or talked about it. We saw that VSS's 800 had stopped at about 885 or 910 or something like that. Versus Priyashmita's 50 had gone on to give us 10,500 respondents. So that's how network effects work with women. Because women tell more women, the ones who trust me, they try it out and then they tell others, and the ones who trust them try it out and they tell others. So it's a geometric progression of sorts, right? 800 versus 10,500, dramatic difference. So those two aspects put together create that business value that you get from women. Because they're time poor, they don't want to try out 10 different things. They'll bring more of their business to you once you prove to be worthy of their trust.
Got it. Thank you so much for that elaborate answer. Are there other questions in the house? Please feel free to come in.
Chaitra, hi. Sorry. Have a question which is around, the bank account usage of women and all that. I'm sure you'll be evaluating, underwriting these women, probably also in general evaluating how active their bank accounts are and the like. So just wanted to get a sense from you. I mean, again, even this is there a certain cohort which is probably more active?
Yeah.
Or is there any difference that you see when compared to men? How does it do?
Yeah, huge difference, Sandeep. And in fact, it's both, personally, it's both frustrating as well as that's the opportunity. The poorer women are more likely because there the need is more acute. If they don't do it, they cannot rely on their spouses usually because of the circumstances. I think that's what made microfinance so successful, is that it is a necessity. As you move up the economic ladder, it gets harder and harder to acquire women, not to acquire women, sorry. As you move up the economic ladder, you observe that women treat it as more and more an optional activity. Managing their money or doing anything with respect to their money by themselves becomes an optional activity for them. It's not a necessity. Unless there is a life circumstance which forces the male member they depend on out of their lives. Either it could be because of demise or divorce or estrangement, right? That is when, and the irony, Sandeep, is that when women start managing their money, 9 out of 10 cases that I have studied, and I have studied more than 100 cases very deeply, they do a 10x better job than their male counterparts. I've seen so many women whose spouses have died and they've taken over the business and the finances of their families, and they've taken it to the next level. And how? But they don't choose to do it. As you move up the economic ladder, that's what you observe. The initiative is lower. So I'll give you another example. Is like, so then therefore the question for us automatically was, which cohorts do we go after? The single mothers, divorced or widowed or whatever they are. I think those were, so because we thought that, okay, school teachers and nurses, right? Large numbers of women work in those industries, but those were the most apathetic customer bases. Like I have done so many workshops for school teachers, for nurses, etc., especially school teachers and college professors. They could not be more uninterested in managing their money as a cohort than anybody else, right? It was just so disheartening for me to see. But the communities that were single parents, book lovers communities, fitness enthusiast communities, I think those communities are a magnet for women who are oriented towards taking initiative themselves. These are women who take charge of their lives, right? Basically, wherever you find cohorts of people who have taken charge of their lives, those cohorts are the ones, Sandeep, who have a higher financial activity. So I think for women, you cannot slice and dice on typical demographic. You'll have to look at behavioral aspects.
Got it. Thanks. That's wonderful insight, actually. By the way, I can totally relate to, sitting in the pause and, observing what these people do have done that previously. So can be
Oh,
really, really insightful. So
yes,
yeah.
yes.
Great. If there are no other questions, maybe a comment from me, Chaitra. So what you closed off with was that you can't really draw these lines along demographic characteristics for women, while behavior markers and indicators do play a big role, which kind of gives me hope around how seamlessly these insights can be translated to women that are further down the bottom of the pyramid, further down the pyramid. And I think these are some really incredible insights and have given us a lot of food for thought. Thank you so very much for making the time, and hopefully we'll see you in the subsequent forum sessions that we host.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me the time.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.